all. Eric,
let's do this.
Let's talk about the NFL Combine, which started today. It runs through the week, and there's a lot of different attention that needs to be paid to a lot of different places.
Mm-hmm.
Defense specifically is where the Lions should be focusing. Should the Lions only be looking at defensive players at this Combine? I know that's a very simple question to answer probably, but I think they probably should.
It is a simple question. You just gave the wrong answer.
Okay.
I think people need to start giving the Lions a little bit more credit. I know we're scared as fans,
A little bit.
but let's be real about what we saw. Now, yes, it started off bad. You can't take that away from what they did with the season start. But this team ended 9-7. The defense turned things around with some breakout performances by a lot of young rookie players that we didn't even expect to play as well as they did. Kirby Joseph, Malcolm Rodriguez, even Hutchinson himself. I didn't expect it to be as involved as he was. So knowing that this team did a lot of things. We beat good teams. We beat teams that matter in the division. To me, I think for teams that are trying to turn it around, the easiest way to start that turnaround is by competing and winning in your division. That one loss cost them against the Vikings, but outside of that, they were great in the division this year. So I think the Lions have the ability to look outside defense if they choose to. It doesn't mean any defensive position or offensive position. It's not best offensive player available. If you're going to go offense, it has to be one of the key pieces that you need, whether it's a guard. You've pushed back on the idea of a receiver. I still think they need a number 3. I wouldn't take him as high as number 1, but the question is, should they be paying attention to only defensive players in the Combine? No. They should be looking at tight ends. They should be looking at receivers. You should be looking at offensive guards as well. Maybe even running backs, because they might get them late in the drafts. But yes, I think they should keep offense on the board 100%.
I want to go back to something that you said real quick.
Okay.
They beat good teams in that stretch. Did they?
Yes.
Who?
They
the
beat
Vikings, who we consider a fraud. The
Sure.
Green Bay Packers, who we know were as dysfunctional as Al Bundy's Married with Children family.
Okay.
Who did they beat?
They beat teams that were on their schedule that had better records than them, that were playing hotter and better than them.
The Jacksonville Jaguars?
I didn't buy the Jets. Yes, I admit and agree with you. They're a fraud team. But what did they do to the Jaguars? They beat their behinds at home and treated bad teams like they were supposed to. And they beat the good wins when they weren't expected to.
But I'm saying, what good teams? There wasn't really good teams that they beat on that back half of the schedule. Everybody thought at the beginning of the year last year that the beginning of the schedule was going to be the easy part, right? With the Eagles, who we didn't think were anything, but, I said a long time ago, they're probably a team that we should be paying attention to.
And you
the
abandoned
Vikings,
them.
Who we said are frauds. The Commanders, right? Those were the teams that they were supposed to beat. I'm just trying to figure out, the one good team that they played, the Bills, they ended up losing to. Could they have beaten them, and did they play well enough to beat them? Yes, they did. But at the same time, they didn't really beat anybody of significance that I can remember. I could be wrong.
You're wrong.
Blast
you
me
are
in the
wrong.
comments if I'm wrong.
You are wrong. Because even if it's not the teams that you just named outside the division, they played well and competitive in every single game in the division. Okay. So even if it's not those playoff teams outside, those teams matter as well.
I'm 100% with you on that. But we have also said on this show very recently that the NFC North is not a very good division.
Totally agree.
So the teams that they're beating and competing with, are they competing with them because maybe they're just not there yet and they have significant holes on their defense that cause those problems, a la the loss to Minnesota earlier in the year where they completely blew coverages and Amani Oruwariye couldn't keep his hands off of Adam Thielen. That's significant thing. You got to take the whole into account. We can't just take the 8-2 over the last 10 into account. We need to take all 17 into account.
But let me ask you a question, then I'm going to let you tee off.
Okay.
If let's say they lost to the Giants or they lost to the Jags or any of those teams that you just tried to discredit, we would be looking at them and killing them for losing to those teams. We got to at very least give them credit when they take care of business when they're not supposed to or when they are supposed to.
Yes, you're 100% right. And you're correct. I do give them credit for going 8-2 in those last 10 because they did beat the teams that were on their schedule. You have no control who's on your schedule. You just have to beat the team that you're supposed to play that Sunday.
Exactly.
I'm with you, and they did that, and they did that phenomenally well. But it's not like they were playing though the Chiefs, right? It's not like they were playing, those
the Bills.
I named the Bills as the good team that they played. Not they were playing the Bengals or the Niners or any. You know what I'm saying? Like those are the teams and those are the games that I feel like I really want to see what they look like against those teams. I don't want to see them beat the Jaguars 40-7 or whatever that was. Because is that really a measure of how good they are? Now, I will say, and I call it the Green Bay Packers dysfunctional. The win in Green Bay was important, and it was a big win, and it was a good win. I'm with you on that.
And the one at Ford Field was huge.
And the one at Ford Field, which kind of kicked all of this off, right? It kind of kicked off the winning streak, if you will. But there's significant problems on that defense. There's significant problems on that defense. And this defensive draft class, if you look at the defensive draft class, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, almost half of the top 16. And if you go even farther to the top 18, like our defensive players, I'm sitting there and maybe it's an 80-20 rule. I'm spending 80% of my time watching these defensive players and scouting these defensive players, 20% of my time on the offense. Because the offense was not a problem last year. At all.
That's not true. There was a stretch where they were bad. They were hurt and they lacked depth at receiver when the offensive line was dealing with injuries, really from the start of the season.
Solely Jared Goff's fault, actually.
Okay, but we'll get into that.
I was waiting for a reaction there, man. Come on.
I thought we were going to let Jared Goff skate on this episode. But fine. Okay. No, go ahead.
So if that's the case, if you think that they need to look at offense, what type of offensive talent are you looking at? Are you looking at top-tier offensive talent that you're going to use one of the first 5 picks that you have in the top 81 picks on an offensive player?
I won't rule it out. Let's say this. First of all, I trust whatever Brad Holmes goes with.
I agree.
However,
I do too. To an extent.
So you don't think they're at a position where they could, like, a big conversation is big quarterback? I'm not opposed to it, but I'm not in love with the idea. Let's just say hypothetically they get an Anthony Richardson and they stash him away. Do you think they could still make use of the rest of their picks to fill in the holes that you're talking about? Because yes, there are a lot of holes on defense, but to say that they got 5 of the first 85 it was 81?
5 of the first 81.
I don't think they need all 5 on defense to make sure that they're going to be good next season.
I don't either.
So they can look at offense.
Your first round picks come with that added 5th-year option.
Okay.
Your top offensive talent, you can't use it. You can't use all those first 2 picks on off. You just can't. In my opinion, the only way you could, and this is barring like a miracle and everything working out. And we're going to get into like the trade discussion here in the next segment. But if you were to like trade back and end up like 20-ish, somewhere in there, 20 to 28, and Anthony Richardson was still on the board, that's potential.
Okay.
That's potentially an acceptable move. I would not trade up to take Anthony Richardson like they did last year to get J-Mo.
Me neither.
I would not, and I've seen this guy mocked to the Lions quite often at 18. I would not use 18 to get Quentin Johnson either from TCU.
I wouldn't either.
I would not use 18 to draft Bijan Robinson. And I have said on this show quite often, I'm not really looking at an offensive type player until at least round 2, maybe even the 2nd pick of round 2.
Which would still be considered early. Yeah.
But most of your top tier offensive talent isn't really going to be there at that point. So is it worth it? You know what I'm saying? This is a very
Sure.
like if I'm looking at the draft Bible that I've composed or compiled, like you could get an offensive guard in that second round for sure.
Right.
But like your top quarterbacks, Stroud, Young, Levis, and Richardson, they're going to be off the board by the second round. Almost guaranteed.
For sure.
Your top receivers, Quentin Johnson, Jordan Addison, Jackson Smith, Nick Jibba. They could be off the board by the second round. Maybe not Smith, Nick Jibba. But I can't see a scenario outside of making a Jameson Williams type move where offense is the top priority.
But see, that's where you're going that I don't agree with. See, you keep saying as if they're gonna like maybe trade up for a receiver or gamble on
sure.
something. Like I'm not saying do that. Like
no,
if there's a tight end that they're in love with, fans are going to riot. Like I think if they take Robinson early, fans will be very upset with that. If it's a move that makes sense, like a trenches move for the guard, or you trade back and. See, honestly, I'm not in love with trading back and taking any offensive player early. I'm with you on taking them in the second, maybe. But at that point, it's still early in the draft. So they should at least be looking, but it's a very limited group of offensive players they should be looking at. So we can split the difference there.
The top guard, and we would agree that guard is a position in need. Let me just be very clear. Here's what I think the Lions' positions of need is ranked in order. Cornerback, defensive line, offensive guard, tight end, quarterback. In that order.
Okay.
Would you agree?
No, I put linebacker before quarterback.
Before quarterback?
Yeah.
Okay.
Outside of that, I'm okay with, but just linebacker has to be in there.
I would actually you're right. I would put linebacker before tight end. I'd put quarterback, defensive line, offensive guard, linebacker, tight end, quarterback.
Okay.
The top offensive guard, according to my rankings that I've compiled from 5 different ranking websites, is Osiris Torrance from Florida. And he's the 24th best prospect. He ranks 26 on my cumulative ranking.
Yeah, it's not rich in offensive linemen of the first round at least.
No, right? Yeah. But it is rich in defensive players. Like I said, you've got a ton of defensive players. Jahmyr Gibbs is up there as a running back. I don't think he's worth a first round pick. I personally don't even think Keely Ringo's worth a first round pick, and he's a quarterback.
He keeps falling a lot.
Right, because he's a freak athlete, but he doesn't anticipate well.
Right.
And in the NFL, a quarterback, anticipation is everything.
He'll eat that alive.
And that's going to be part of the trade-up suggestion, okay, or a segment coming up. But we pick 6 and 18 right now. I don't think they pick 6 and 18 when the draft comes. There's going to be some kind of trade that's going to be made. And plus, we don't even know, right? March 15th is when free agency is going to start, which could shake up the entire draft strategy depending on who they sign, right? If they sign Bobby Wagner, well, guess what? Linebacker's not a need anymore.
Yeah, they're all set at that point.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So I don't know. I feel like my opinion would also change if they signed like a Bobby Wagner. And let's say they sign like a Wagner and maybe a second-tier defensive interior guy. Okay. Now,
then we're talking.
Now your strategy can change.
Yeah.
Now your offense is more of a priority.
But as it sits right now, yes.
But as it sits right now,
yeah,
your first 3 picks have got to be defense.
Yep. I'm okay with that philosophy.
Maybe even your first 4 picks. And then in the third round, you're seeing if one of the tight ends is still available. Dalton Kincaid or Darnell Washington, right?
Yes.
Or Hendon Hooker. He's older. I get it. Understand. But could be there. I also, think that there's going to be plenty of quarterback talent available towards the 6th round that could at least be a suitable backup. And you see what you have. And then next year's when you maybe make a splash and trade up to get one of the better quarterbacks.
Right.
Like the kid from USC, Caleb Williams. That would take a lot. I get
that would take a lot, yes.
But I'm just saying at the same time, there's plenty of ways you can go, and I think the next few weeks, specifically what happens at the Combine and what happens in free agency are going to make the picture much more clear as to what the draft should look like for
Do
the
you buy
Lions.
do you buy into the combine?
To an extent, I do. What I don't buy into, and I'll be very clear on this, is I don't buy into somebody who might be. Let's take a Keely Ringo for example. He's going to test well at the combine.
Oh yeah.
I'm not taking him going from like a mid-tier, like late first round to mid-second round type pick, being shot up into the top 10 of the first round. I don't buy that at all. It's the same thing with Walker from last year.
Okay.
Aiden Hutchinson legitimately should be a Jacksonville Jaguar.
He should.
Because of the combine,
right.
even though Hutchinson had a great combine as well, Walker ends up being the number one pick, which is fine. Like, worked out great for us. I'm not upset about that in the slightest bit.
Not at all.
But I don't buy the guys that meteorically rise because of the combine. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, you see that with the pro day as well. For quarterbacks more
Zach
than anybody.
Wilson, he makes one throw during the pro day and becomes a number 2 overall
Perfect
pick.
example. Malik Willis, Lions fans, myself included, we were seduced by what he was doing at the pro day.
I didn't buy
everybody clamored
I
for him.
didn't love it.
I was into it.
And then you get guys who are like solid, specifically in college, who maybe don't test well or are injured, like N'Kobe Dean, who was my guy.
Right.
Like if around the draft last year, I was hollering for N'Kobe Dean. I understand he went a lot later than what he was projected to go, but yeah, there's value to it. I think I just don't think you don't measure good football players strictly on speed, jumping ability, and agility drills.
Right.
Because yes, that's part of the game. 100% that's part of the game, but that doesn't measure intangibles. Like it doesn't mean they're a good football player. It just means they're a really fast athlete.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
that doesn't translate right away.
I don't buy into it a ton, but we'll see. It's going to be interesting this week, though. I'm excited. Like, I like watching the combine. It's fun to watch them go through the drills.
Yeah. I don't stop. I don't sit and watch it. I don't know, but I look at the highlights. Something pops up on the timeline. I'll check it out and see what it's about. But that's as far as it goes for me.